Have you ever thought about what you would tell your younger self if you had the chance to go back in time? These are the important lessons I've learned through the years that I wish I had known earlier, and I'd love to share them with you now. As we get older, we often look back on our lives and realize that some things we took for granted could have made our journey much smoother if we had known them earlier. Life has a way of teaching us valuable lessons, but sometimes those lessons come a little too late. The good news is, it's never too late to start applying these lessons. In this video, I'm going to share some of the most important advice I would give my younger self. These aren't just things to think about. They are real practical steps you can take right now to live a more fulfilling, peaceful, and successful life. So stick with me. Until the end, these lessons can change your outlook on life and help you make the most of the time you have ahead of you. The first piece of advice I would give my younger self is this: learn to be bored without reaching for a distraction. In a world that constantly demands our attention with phones buzzing, screens flashing, and an endless stream of information at our fingertips, boredom has almost become a forgotten state. But here's what I wish someone had told me sooner: boredom isn't the enemy. In fact, learning to sit with boredom without immediately turning to a distraction is one of the greatest superpowers you can develop in today's noisy world. It's in those quiet, seemingly uneventful moments that your mind can finally breathe, reflect, and reset. I used to think every minute needed to be filled. Podcasts while driving, emails over breakfast, scrolling social media while waiting in line. I mistook movement for meaning and stimulation for productivity. But the truth is, our brains, much like our bodies, need moments of stillness to recover. When we never pause, we run the risk of emotional burnout, mental fog, and creative stagnation. And research backs this up. A study by Dr. Sandy Mann from the University of Central Lancashire found that people who engaged in boring tasks like copying numbers from a phone book actually performed better on creative problem-solving tests afterward. Why? Because their minds had the chance to wander to rest and to connect new ideas in unexpected ways. Let me share a little story. Harold, a 66-year-old retired engineer I met at a local community center. For most of his career, Harold was always on the move: meetings, deadlines, travel responsibilities. When he retired, he found himself restless and a little lost. He'd wake up and immediately turn on the TV just to fill the silence. But over time, that constant noise only made him feel more disconnected. One day, during a particularly quiet afternoon, he decided to just sit on his porch and do nothing. No phone, no distractions, just birdsong and a warm cup of coffee. At first, it felt uncomfortable. He said it felt like itching inside my brain, but the more he practiced it, the more peace he found in that stillness. Eventually, those quiet moments became his favorite part of the day. The space where new ideas came to him, where he remembered old dreams, and where he finally started sketching again, something he hadn't done in 40 years. Boredom, it turns out, isn't empty. It's a signal, a pause button that allows our inner world to come forward. It gives space for our thoughts to settle, for our emotions to speak, and for creativity to bloom. In fact, studies published in the journal Academy of Management Discoveries show that when workers were given idle time before a creative task, their ideas were significantly more original compared to those who were kept constantly stimulated. Another survey from Microsoft found that the average human attention span dropped from 12 seconds in the year 2000 to just 8 seconds in recent years, shorter than that of a goldfish. This drop isn't just amusing. It's a reflection of how our constant chase for stimulation is rewiring our brains and weakening our ability to focus and reflect. So instead of fighting boredom or rushing to fill every gap in the day, I would tell my younger self, lean into it, embrace the quiet. Let your thoughts drift. It might feel uncomfortable at first, even foreign. But that discomfort is where growth begins. That stillness is where your mind gets to stretch and heal. Don't be afraid to spend a few minutes just staring out the window. Don't feel guilty for sitting in silence after a long walk. Those aren't wasted moments. They're some of the most important ones you'll ever have. And the more you practice being bored without needing to fix it, the more clarity, creativity, and calm you'll find waiting for you in the silence. Building on that, the second piece of advice I would give my younger self is this: remove the energy vampires from your life and do it without guilt. It might sound harsh at first, but I promise you it's one of the kindest things you can do for yourself. As you get older, you begin to realize that not every person who enters your life is meant to stay, and not every relationship is worth preserving. Some people don't just take up space, they drain your spirit. These are the individuals who constantly complain, criticize, demand attention, or bring drama wherever they go. At first, you might think it's your job to help them to be patient or to be the bigger person. But over time, you'll come to understand that your emotional energy is not infinite, and it must be guarded. Let me tell you about Joyce, a 70-year-old widow I met at a local book club. Joyce is one of the warmest, most compassionate women you'll ever meet. For decades, she kept a lifelong friend in her circle, someone she grew up with and felt loyal to. But this friend, whom she called Mary, had a habit of turning every conversation into a crisis. No gathering was ever calm. Mary would gossip, judge others, interrupt everyone, and dominate Joyce's time with negativity. Joyce often left their visits feeling exhausted, but she kept showing up out of habit, out of loyalty, out of fear of being unkind. One day, after a particularly draining lunch, Joyce sat in her car and asked herself a simple but powerful question. Do I ever feel better after being with her? The answer was no. And that moment changed everything. Joyce began distancing herself gently and without blame. She stopped taking every call. She politely declined invitations. And instead she poured more energy into friendships that made her laugh, made her feel seen, and brought her peace. The result, her sleep improved, her mood lifted, and she even picked up painting again, something she hadn't had the energy for in years. What Joyce did wasn't selfish. It was necessary. Studies show that chronic exposure to toxic relationships can lead to elevated stress hormones, higher blood pressure, and weakened immune function. The American Psychological Association has linked long-term emotional strain from negative relationships to increased risk of heart disease and depression. On the flip side, healthy, positive relationships have been shown to boost life expectancy, reduce anxiety, and improve recovery from illness. According to a Harvard study that tracked over 700 people for more than 75 years, the clearest predictor of long-term happiness and health wasn't wealth or success, it was the quality of one's relationships. So no, you're not being unkind by setting boundaries. You're being wise. Protecting your peace is not a luxury, it's a responsibility. And you don't need to make a dramatic scene or give long explanations. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop engaging with what drains you. I would tell my younger self, pay attention to how people make you feel. Do you leave a conversation feeling lighter or heavier? Do they lift you up or pull you down? You have a right to choose who has access to your energy. Fill your life with those who celebrate your presence, not those who merely tolerate it or worse, exploit it. The older you get, the more you'll treasure peace over performance and meaningful connection over constant obligation. So let go with grace. You're not walking away from people, you're walking toward a life that feels lighter, fuller, and more free, and you deserve that. And along those same lines of protecting your peace and preserving your energy, the third piece of advice I would give my younger self is this: stop worrying about things you can't control. Worry is one of those silent thieves in life. It doesn't knock things over or make a loud mess. It just slowly steals your joy, your sleep, and your ability to be fully present. We often believe that by worrying we're somehow being responsible, preparing for the worst, or caring deeply. But the truth is, worry doesn't solve tomorrow's problems. It only robs today's peace. I wish I had learned that sooner. I spent far too many nights lying awake, turning over every what-if scenario in my head, thinking that if I just worried enough, I could somehow protect myself or my family from pain. But all it did was wear me down, and I'm not alone. Studies show that chronic worrying is not only mentally exhausting, it's physically harmful. According to research published by the American Heart Association, excessive worry is linked to higher blood pressure, increased risk of cardiovascular disease, and weakened immune response. Worse yet, a study from Penn State University revealed that about 85% of the things people worry about never actually happen. That means we're spending enormous emotional energy stressing over things that will likely never come to pass. Let me tell you about Richard, a 68-year-old grandfather I met through a local gardening club. Richard spent much of his adult life worrying about his children, whether they'd make good choices, whether they'd have stable jobs, whether they'd be okay after he was gone. He admitted that even when things were going well, he felt anxious, like something bad was always around the corner. For years, this constant worry left him tired, distracted, and unable to fully enjoy his own life. But after a minor stroke that shook him to the core, Richard had a turning point. His doctor told him bluntly, "Your stress is aging you faster than time." That hit him hard. So Richard decided to make a change, not by pretending everything was fine, but by letting go of what he couldn't control. He focused on what was within his power, loving his family, being present, managing his health, and finding joy in daily routines. And as he slowly released the grip of worry, his entire outlook changed. He laughed more, slept better. Even his blood pressure improved. Richard told me something I've never forgotten. I realized worry is just fear disguised as planning. And he was right. Worry often masquerades as responsibility, but more often than not, it's just fear trying to convince us that something is wrong when everything is in fact okay. That's why I would tell my younger self, you are allowed to care deeply and still sleep soundly. You don't have to carry every burden. Not every bad thing is your job to prevent. Focus on what you can control: your thoughts, your attitude, your actions, and release the rest. Make a habit of pausing and asking yourself, is this something I can do something about right now? If not, let it go. Your mind deserves peace. Your body needs rest. Your soul needs breathing room. Worry will never prepare you the way acceptance will. And you don't need to brace for impact all the time. Sometimes life is kinder than we expect. So breathe. Stay present. Do your best and trust that everything else will unfold with or without your worry. And just as learning to let go of worry can bring peace to your mind, the fourth piece of advice I would give my younger self is this: treat sleep like the life-saving medicine it truly is. We live in a culture that often glorifies hustle late nights and pushing through fatigue. But over time, I've learned that sacrificing sleep isn't a sign of strength. It's a slow form of self-destruction. Sleep isn't wasted time. It's restoration. It's your body's natural way of healing, balancing, and preparing you for the day ahead. Yet too many of us treat it like an afterthought. I did. I used to stay up late to finish just one more task, thinking I could make up for it later. But later never came. And gradually I found myself foggy, irritable, and constantly running on fumes, not realizing that I was trading long-term health for short-term busyness. The science is crystal clear. According to the National Sleep Foundation, adults over 65 need between 7 and 8 hours of sleep per night for optimal health. When we consistently get less than that, we put ourselves at increased risk for heart disease, diabetes, depression, memory loss, and even weakened immunity. One landmark study published in the journal Sleep followed over 1,500 older adults and found that those who regularly got fewer than 6 hours of sleep per night had significantly higher rates of cognitive decline and dementia over a 10-year period. That's not just a warning, it's a wake-up call. Consider Linda, a 72-year-old former nurse I met during a wellness seminar. For decades, Linda worked night shifts, always putting others first and ignoring her own exhaustion. Even after retirement, her sleep habits were irregular. She'd stay up late, watching TV, wake up tired, and rely on naps just to get through the day. She assumed poor sleep was just part of getting older, but after several health scares, including a spike in blood pressure and a fall caused by grogginess, her doctor urged her to change course. Linda began treating sleep like a priority instead of an inconvenience. She created a relaxing bedtime routine, limited caffeine in the evening, turned off all screens an hour before bed, and made her bedroom a calm, screen-free zone. Within weeks, her energy returned, her mood lifted, and she even felt more mentally alert. Linda told me I didn't realize how bad I felt until I finally started feeling good again. And that's the quiet danger of sleep deprivation. It becomes your normal until you experience the alternative. Good sleep isn't just about feeling rested. It's directly tied to your emotional regulation, memory, immune function, and even your ability to make decisions. According to the CDC, seniors who regularly sleep well have lower rates of chronic illness, fewer accidents, and better overall quality of life. That's why I would tell my younger self sleep is not a luxury, it's a necessity. It's one of the most powerful, affordable, and accessible forms of self-care we have. And no to-do list is more important than the repair your body does while you rest. So set a bedtime and honor it like an appointment. Wind down with intention. Guard your sleep the way you would guard your health, because they are one and the same. You don't have to earn rest. You were born deserving of it. And the more you make peace with sleep, the more you'll find yourself waking up to a life that feels clearer, lighter, and more alive. And once you've started honoring your rest, the next lesson flows naturally. Understand that a goal is just the destination, but the small daily steps are your true GPS. If I could sit down with my younger self, I'd say this as gently and clearly as possible. Dreaming big is beautiful, but without a steady path beneath your feet, that dream becomes a weight instead of a motivation. Too often we get caught up in the grand vision, losing weight, writing a book, starting a business, saving for retirement, and we become overwhelmed by the size of the mountain instead of simply taking the first step up the hill. What I've learned is that progress doesn't come from sudden bursts of motivation. It comes from showing up again and again, doing the small things that slowly build into something meaningful. Research from the Harvard Business Review confirms this. In one large study, individuals who broke big goals into smaller specific action steps were 40% more likely to achieve them. That's not just encouraging, it's a strategy. Because when you focus on the process rather than the prize, you shift your energy from anxiety to clarity. You stop asking, "Will I ever get there?" and instead ask, "What can I do today?" Let me introduce you to Joe, a 65-year-old former truck driver I met during a local financial literacy course. Joe had always dreamed of owning his own woodworking shop in retirement. For years, the idea sat in the back of his mind, but the size of the dream made it feel distant and unrealistic. He had no business background, little savings, and no idea where to begin. So he kept putting it off, telling himself, maybe next year. But after attending one workshop, something clicked. Joe didn't need to open a shop tomorrow, he just needed to start. That week, he began setting aside $20 each paycheck, reading one article a day about small business basics, and building one piece of furniture a month in his garage. Within 2 years, Joe had his own booth at a weekend artisan market, and now he sells handmade furniture part-time, doing what he loves. Joe didn't get there by magic. He got there by breaking the dream into steps and walking them consistently. Studies from the American Psychological Association show that goal segmentation, dividing large goals into smaller tasks, reduces procrastination, increases motivation, and lowers stress. People feel more accomplished and less discouraged when they can track their progress in bite-sized chunks. Even better, a study published in Psychology Today found that people who celebrated small wins like finishing a daily walk or saving a few dollars reported significantly higher levels of satisfaction and long-term goal achievement. That's because consistency builds confidence. I'd tell my younger self this: don't wait for the perfect conditions to begin. Perfection is a moving target, and waiting for it will only leave you stuck. Instead, start where you are with what you have. Whether it's 10 minutes a day of stretching, 5 minutes of journaling, one healthy meal, or a single phone call, every step matters. And when those steps are repeated with care, they become momentum. Don't let the size of the goal scare you. Let the rhythm of the process steady you. Your destination is shaped by the path you choose every day, not the day you finally arrive. So lace up your shoes, pick a direction, and start walking, because forward is forward, no matter how small the step. And once you start taking those steady steps toward your goals, there's one thing you absolutely must remember along the way. Always, always prioritize your health. You might think this sounds obvious, but it's one of the most overlooked truths we often push aside until it's nearly too late. When we're younger, we feel invincible. We skip meals, stay up too late, overwork ourselves, push through pain, and tell ourselves we'll deal with it later. But here's what I've learned the hard way. There is no achievement, no dream, no relationship, no bucket list adventure that's worth more than your health. Without it, everything else becomes harder. With it, everything else becomes possible. Take Ellen, a 67-year-old retired teacher I met through a local wellness group. For most of her life, Ellen poured everything into her students and her family. She skipped workouts because she was too busy. She ate whatever was convenient. She told herself, I'll get back to healthy habits once things slow down. But life never really slowed down. At 62, she found herself constantly fatigued, gaining weight, struggling with high blood pressure, and feeling older than her years. After a routine checkup revealed she was pre-diabetic, she had a wake-up call. Instead of panicking, she chose to pivot. She began walking 30 minutes a day, cooking more meals at home, and saying no to things that drained her energy. 5 years later, Ellen is off her blood pressure medication, 35 pounds lighter, and she's never felt more alive. Her story is not about perfection, it's about intention, and the science supports every bit of it. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC), just 150 minutes of moderate-intensity aerobic activity per week, such as brisk walking, can significantly reduce the risk of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and even certain types of cancer. Physical activity also helps with depression, anxiety, and maintaining cognitive function as we age. And it's not just about exercise. A study published in The Lancet found that poor diet contributes to more deaths worldwide than smoking. Yet the good news is that even modest dietary improvements, like adding more fruits and vegetables and cutting back on processed foods, can lead to remarkable health benefits over time. Small, consistent changes matter. The same is true for stress management, hydration, and sleep. When you make your health a priority, not an afterthought, you're not being selfish. You're being wise. You're choosing to give your future self a fighting chance to thrive, not just survive. I'd tell my younger self this: your body is not a machine you can run into the ground and simply expect to recover. It's a living, breathing partner in this life, and it deserves to be cared for with respect. Make your doctor's appointments. Move your body. Eat food that fuels, not just fills. Rest when you're tired. Say no when your plate is already full. Health isn't something we can buy back later, and the price of ignoring it is far higher than the cost of caring for it now. So love yourself enough to listen to your body the first time it whispers, not just when it screams. Because when you take care of your health, you're not just adding years to your life, you're adding life to your years. And that, more than any goal or title, is what truly makes a life worth living. And once you begin treating your health as the foundation it truly is, the final piece of advice I would offer my younger self becomes clear. Life is about balance, not perfection. If there's one lesson that softens with time and deepens with age, it's this: trying to have everything figured out, done right, or under control is not only exhausting, it's impossible. And more importantly, it's unnecessary. The pursuit of perfection can quietly drain the joy out of your days, leaving you feeling like nothing you do is ever quite enough. But life doesn't reward perfection. It rewards presence, effort, and grace. I spent so many years trying to be everything to everyone, checking boxes, chasing approval, measuring myself against impossible standards. And while I accomplished many things, I missed out on moments of peace because I was too busy chasing a version of life that didn't even exist. Real happiness, I've learned, comes not from doing everything right, but from learning how to sit comfortably in the messiness of life. Loving what is letting go of what isn't, and knowing that good enough is often more than enough. Let me tell you about Carla, a 69-year-old former business owner I met during a retreat. For decades, Carla was the definition of high achiever. She ran a successful company, raised 2 children, volunteered on weekends, and rarely rested. Her schedule was color-coded and packed. She lived by the mantra, if you're not doing it all, you're not doing enough. But as the years went on, she began to feel burned out, disconnected from her family, and emotionally depleted. It wasn't until her youngest daughter sat her down and gently said, "Mom, we don't need you to be perfect. We just want you to be present," that she realized something had to change. Carla stepped back. She let go of some responsibilities, embraced slower mornings, and gave herself permission to say no. And in that space, she rediscovered laughter, stillness, and the simple joy of being. Research backs this up. A study from the University of Toronto found that people who strive for healthy striving, a balanced effort toward growth without obsessing over flawlessness, have lower levels of depression and anxiety, and significantly higher levels of life satisfaction. Meanwhile, those who pursue perfection often struggle with chronic stress, strained relationships, and lower self-esteem. The truth is, perfectionism is not a badge of honor. It's a burden. And as we age, we realize that real peace comes not from getting it all right, but from learning how to be gentle with ourselves when things go wrong. I would tell my younger self, give yourself permission to be human. Some days the house will be messy, the meal will be late. You'll forget something important, and that's okay. Life is not a performance. It's a journey filled with detours, delays, and discoveries. What matters most is not how flawless it looks from the outside, but how true it feels on the inside. Focus on what brings you peace, not praise. Find rhythm, not routine. Create space for joy, not just tasks. And when you fall short, and you will treat yourself with the same kindness you offer everyone else. Because in the end, it's not the polished moments that define a life, it's the honest ones. The moments where we pause, breathe, forgive, and choose to begin again. That is where real strength lives. That is where life in all its imperfect beauty truly begins. And when all these lessons come together, learning to embrace stillness, protecting your energy, letting go of worry, honoring your sleep, taking steady steps, prioritizing your health, and choosing balance over perfection, they don't just form a checklist. They shape a new way of living. A quieter, wiser, more intentional life. One that doesn't chase approval or rush through the years, but instead values what truly matters. Peace of mind, strength of heart, and the joy of being fully present. If I could place these lessons into the hands of my younger self, I wouldn't do it with urgency or regret. I'd do it with a smile and a gentle whisper. You're doing better than you think, and the best is still ahead. So I invite you to reflect, what would you tell your younger self today? What wisdom have you earned through time and experience that someone else might need to hear? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to read them. And if this video spoke to something in your heart, don't forget to share it with someone who needs encouragement, and hit the subscribe button so you never miss another message that could bring light into your day. Thank you for spending this time with me, and remember, it's never too late to live with more intention, more gentleness, and more grace. I'll see you in the next video.